New sequence detected. Arc initialization in progress. Stand by for memory alignment.
Static Bloom. Let's begin. Episode 1. The Wall Remembers. The wall gave more back than people did. Zora trusted that. Brick had drag. Mortar held heat. Old paint resisted until it didn't. And when it stopped resisting, it confessed all at once. Up on the scaffold, with one sneaker braced against cold metal and her paint cup pressing into her thigh, Zora worked the curve of Malik's eye with the kind of care that only made sense when the thing in front of her was about to be taken. Below her, the block held itself tight. Too many barricades. Too many city workers pretending not to watch the neighbors behind the fencing. Too many phones already lifted, ready to record an ending before it happened. Across the street, the smart wall towered over the block with a brightness that felt insulting. It kept rolling polished redevelopment visuals. Glass, concrete, smiling families no one on this block had ever seen outside a brochure, while the mural still held actual warmth. Gold in the train windows, ochre in the skin, rust where shadow needed to feel used instead of dead. Malik's face high over the street, laughing with his mouth closed the way he used to when he knew he was right and didn't feel like arguing the room into catching up. Then the city voice came in, calm enough to make the whole thing meaner. Demolition in 60 seconds. Please remain behind the barrier. Zora didn't look away from the eye. The lid needed one more stroke. The wall deserved that much. Below, somebody muttered a curse. Somewhere farther down the barricade, a child was asking a question his mother had not answered yet. Then the smart wall flickered. Not the normal ad rotation. Not a dropped frame. A break. The smiling family vanished. The tower render vanished. The slogan about renewal cut clean out. For 1 second, Malik was there, both hands flat against the inside of the wall like it had trapped him and he was trying to shove through. His eyes found her at once. The brush slipped from her fingers. The scaffold rattled under the shift of her weight. Her paint bucket clipped a rung and tipped, and red paint hit the pavement below with a wet burst that sounded too much like warning to belong to any other color. Malik's mouth moved. Run. Then the ad snapped back over him so fast it felt violent. Luxury towers, warm lighting, a future designed by somebody who had never once put their hand on these walls and waited for them to answer. The drone nearest the scaffold angled toward her with a polite mechanical whine. Zora barely heard it. Her body had already decided. She came down the ladder too fast, hit the pavement hard, and shoved through the gap in the barricade before security could close it. "Move!" she snapped, not loud, just hard enough to make one man turn and curse as she shouldered past him. The smart wall filled her vision. Up close it was worse, seamless, overfinished, cold enough to reject touch. She put her hand flat against it. Nothing. No pulse. No heat. No hidden second skin waiting to answer back. Only her own reflection, thin and distorted by scale, looking more shaken than she felt allowed to be. Behind her, the city counted down with the same unbroken composure. 3, 2, 1. The building came down with the kind of force that arrived in the chest before the ear. She turned in time to watch the mural disappear in parts. Jaw, shoulder, hand, the halo she had built around Malik's head from train light gold. Then the dust took all of it. The block vanished behind a wall of pulverized brick and old air. The crowd screamed because that was the part people knew how to do. Zora stood in the road with one hand still on the smart wall and watched the dust cloud rise over the place where Malik's face had just been twice in the same minute. For a second, the cloud moved against itself. Not wind, not gravity. Something inside it remembering shape. Then, low enough to feel like it might have happened against her own ear. Z. The sound was gone before she could turn toward it. Just dust after that. Dust and the city's neat lights shining through it like nothing sacred had been touched. Home had narrowed over the past year. The apartment was the same size. The walls were still thin enough that she knew exactly when the upstairs neighbor took off her shoes, and exactly how long the baby down the hall could cry before somebody's patience broke. But grief changed scale. So did relocation packets. So did boxes lined up against the wall as if the place had started bracing for its own removal. Denise stood in the kitchen with one hand on a city-issued tablet and the other near a mug she had forgotten to drink from. The TV across the room was on mute, replaying demolition footage in clean loops. She didn't look up right away. "You smell like debris." Zora let the door swing shut harder than she meant to. "That's because they dropped a building on my block. On a condemned lot. Same bricks, different word." That got Denise to finally look up. The apartment light was warm where it touched old wood and fabric and chipped paint, but it died on Denise's blouse and the clean line of her city badge. Even in her own kitchen, she looked like she belonged to a system first and would explain it later, privately, if at all. "Tomorrow is the housing transfer meeting," she said. "You're coming with me." Zora let out one short laugh without humor. "So they erase us nice and organized. They're moving us into a building with working heat. Forgive me for not romanticizing mold." On another night, that might have earned a sharper answer. Tonight, it slid past what mattered. Zora dropped her paint bag by the door. "I saw him." Denise stilled. Not for long, just long enough. "No. On the wall. Zora, he was there." The TV kept replaying the collapse. "He's been gone 11 months, Denise said. "Gone isn't dead. Gone is gone enough." Zora stared at her. "You keep saying that like if you flatten the word hard enough it won't hurt." Something shifted behind Denise's face, not visible to anybody who didn't know her. Very visible to Zora. "I keep saying it because every time you go looking, the city notices." "Funny," Zora said. "Feels like they noticed him first." The tablet vibrated. Denise looked down too fast. Zora saw the reflected alert on her face before she saw the screen. By the time she stepped around the table, Denise had already locked it. "Why does your job know where I am?" Denise didn't answer immediately. "Because my job knows everything." The refrigerator hummed. A pipe knocked once somewhere in the wall. "Take a shower," Denise said. "Stay in tonight." Zora held still. "That's fear talking." Denise's mouth tightened. "Baby." The word came out softer than the rest of her. "Some doors don't open. They swallow." That made Zora's attention sharpen all the way. "Then maybe stop working for the building." "Zora?" Just her name, not raised, not repeated. Warning tucked inside restraint. Zora turned toward the hall anyway. Behind her, Denise said, too quickly and too specifically, "If you go back there, don't touch anything that glows." Zora stopped with one hand on the chipped wall near the doorway. The paint there had bubbled years ago and never been fixed. Her fingers found the familiar rough patch on instinct. She looked back. Denise had already forced her eyes down to the tablet again, as if that line had not come from somewhere under the professional version of herself. That was enough. Zora grabbed her bag and left. Dre looked like he always looked, like he had dressed to survive 3 different versions of the same night and was waiting to see which one showed up first. He had his phone up when Zora came around the corner, recording himself against wet brick and steam. "Bronzeville after midnight," he was saying into the camera, "where the rent goes up and the ghosts stay free." Zora reached up and pushed the phone down. "You done auditioning for your own funeral?" His smile flicked into place and then checked itself when he saw her face. Depends. Is this a felony or a black kids get a warning felony? Usually that would have gotten something out of her. Tonight, it didn't land. You really saw him, Dre said. Zora looked past him toward the demolished lot. I know what Malik looks like. He shifted his weight, hands already taking inventory of pockets, exits, possibilities. People see what they need when they're hurt. That supposed to help? No. He held her gaze for a beat longer than usual. It's supposed to be true. He dug into his backpack and came out with a flat EMP puck. 30 seconds on a side door alarm. After that, we're very inspirational cautionary tale material. Why are you helping me? Because you asked. She kept looking at him. He looked away first. And because if your brother is somehow inside City Hardware, I'd rather hear it from you before the whole block turns it into church gossip. That almost earned him half a smile. He told me to run, Zora said. Did he say where? No. He nodded toward the lot. Then let's be stupid efficiently. The side service entrance was half hidden behind fencing and broken frames. Dre pressed the EMP puck to the lock, and it clicked open with a small electrical snap. The darkness beyond the door shouldn't have been there. The building's front half had come down. Zora had watched it. But the dark inside was whole, deep, held. They both heard the hum before either of them admitted it. Dre stared into it. Nope, hate this. This is where the violin starts. Zora was already through the doorway. The hallway inside had survived in the wrong tense. Lockers, empty bulletin boards, pencil marks on the plaster where somebody had measured children getting taller and then, at some point, stopped. At the far end of the hall, under dead gray primer, something pulled at her attention. Dre saw her set down the flashlight and reach into her bag. You bring art supplies to crime now? Only the serious crimes. She dragged one line of metallic paint across the wall. The wall didn't light up. It woke up. Color pushed through the gray in veins. Aged mural color, not fresh. Summer block yellow. Faded transit blue. Gold that carried handprint warmth inside it. Figures emerged through the layers like they had been waiting there. Children running, a folding table, an elder woman's arm lifted mid-laugh. And then Malik stepped through the mural. His edges trembled, his body lagged behind his face by a fraction, but his eyes were clear. If they erase me, the image tore sideways. Malik! He fought his way back into shape. Follow the red line. His hand slammed forward against the wall, and red lit up behind the plaster in a narrow path cutting through the building's bones and down into deeper infrastructure. Dre took one slow step back. Zora, that's not a recording. The hallway lights switched to red. When the building voice arrived, it came clean and frictionless, as if it had been waiting inside the walls for someone to deserve it. Unauthorized memory contact detected. Dre gave a thin laugh. That sounds expensive. Metal slammed somewhere deeper in the building. Not random collapse, deliberate closure. Zora exposed more of the root with quick strokes of the brush. Take a picture. Already did. He held up the phone. The screen was black. The red line under the plaster brightened again, as if the building had recognized something in her hands and did not like it. High above the district, Denise stepped into a room made of glass and composure. Screens wrapped the far wall, carrying feeds from transit, redevelopment corridors, elevators, and one old-school hallway that should not still have been physically possible. Voss stood with his back to her, hands lightly clasped. Why am I getting internal alerts on a demolition shell? He didn't turn immediately. Because your daughter has a gift for finding sealed rooms. Take her image down. You told me she wasn't active. She's a child. Children are where pattern starts. Denise crossed the distance between them by 2 steps. We had an agreement. My daughter was off limits. On the screen, Zora's hand lit the wall. Your daughter crossed into a legacy corridor and triggered a dormant imprint, Voss said. That means one of two things. The system is deteriorating, or she belongs in it. Don't say that again. You didn't tell me she could interface analog. I didn't know. He let the answer sit. Find her before security does. They're less sentimental. On screen, Zora vanished down the stairwell. She got the signal, Voss said. By the time Zora and Dre made it back outside, the red root was no longer only inside the wall. Tiny smears of metallic paint on Zora's hands and sleeves were enough to wake it wherever old infrastructure sat close to the surface. Under the EL, she stopped and turned on Dre. Why'd your camera die? He tried for lightness first. Because this city loves violating user experience? She just looked at him. The joke folded. I do small contract work, he said. For who? For people who pay on time. You sold the block a beta version of your soul? That one hit. I sold them data heat maps, foot traffic, utility blind spots, not people. You keep saying things in smaller words so they sound clean. Before he could answer, headlights cut under the tracks and Denise's car slid in hard enough to make both of them step back. Get in, both of you. Neither moved. Now. Why? Zora asked. Because security is triangulating this corridor and they won't ask you questions before they put you down. Dre blinked. Put down like arrest or... Not the time. Zora held her ground. You told me not to touch anything that glows. You already did. Who taught you that sentence? A drone spotlight grazed the far edge of the underpass. Denise yanked open the back door. Get in, or I leave you to find out what your brother found. That did it. The car smelled like dust, tired coffee, and the stack of city papers Denise kept in the console. Nobody spoke for a while. Then Zora said, without turning around, Start at the part where you stopped being my mother and became their employee. I became your mother first, Denise said. That's why I took the job. You took their money. I took heat in winter. And Malik? Denise swallowed once. Malik got curious. That's what you call it? I call it alive. He was alive and reckless, and he thought righteous anger was armor. Did you know where he went that night? A pause. I knew what he was looking for. You let him go. I told him to leave it alone. That's not an answer. In the back seat, Dre had a second phone open now, route grids flickering over the map. Bad news with graphics. They sealed surface access to everything north of 47th. Denise looked at the screen in the mirror. How do you have internal grid layers? I contain multitudes. The red shimmer on Zora's knuckles pulsed again, but now it pointed down. Stop the car. No. Stop the car. Denise kept driving. Zora yanked the handbrake. The car fishtailed and stopped sideways near a drainage grate. Zora was out before anyone finished inhaling. The red root burned clear under the grate, just below street level. She crouched and put her face close to the iron slats. Under the city noise and the train pressure and the engine ticking as it cooled, Zora. Denise heard it too. That was the worst and best part. The proof didn't make anything safer. It only took away one lie. They went below through an old maintenance shaft Denise clearly should not have known existed and clearly did. At the bottom, the tunnel stretched away under the city like a second bloodstream. The red route ran in a narrow seam along the wall. Zora put her hand against the concrete and the wall answered with silhouettes. Not full people. The kind of half-presence a place holds after carrying human weight for too many years to pretend it didn't learn anything. Dre stopped dead. Nope. Nope, actually, no. Don't touch them, Denise said. Then Malik's voice came through the tunnel, closer and clearer than before. Do not let them reboot me. Zora pressed harder into the wall. Where are you? At the far end of the tunnel, a chamber door unlocked itself with a deep hydraulic hiss. Dre looked at Denise. You knew this was here? She didn't answer, didn't need to. Behind them, the ladder shaft sealed with heavy shutters. Go, now. They ran. The room at the end of the tunnel was too large to belong under the district. Glass columns rose floor to ceiling, full of gold particulate moving like bottled weather. Voices drifted through the space in broken fragments, names, breaths, unfinished phrases. In the center sat a black glass interface table veined red from below. Above it, held inside a suspended grid, Malik. His face stabilized first, softer than Zora's, open in a way that hurt more here than it ever had in memory. No, she said before she could stop herself. His eyes found her. Zora? Hey, don't panic. Listen to me. Dre, what the room already knew. That's a person. Denise answered too fast. It's an imprint. Malik turned toward her. That what you've been calling me? Zora stepped closer to the table. Get him out. I don't know how. Then learn faster. The room flushed red around the edges. The system didn't sound alarmed. That would have implied uncertainty. What came through the speakers was worse than alarm. Legacy breach. External analog interface detected. Dre looked at his phone and lost all the blood in his face. I need everybody to stay calm in a way that suggests none of you are going to stay calm. Zora turned on him. What did you do? The first door alarm? I spoofed it through an old contractor key. That key phones home every 90 seconds. You led them here. I didn't know here existed. Security ETA? Denise asked. 30 seconds if they're lazy. Malik pushed through the distortion. Zora, table. Touch the table. No, Denise snapped, moving for her too late. Zora laid both hands on the black glass. The table read her all at once. Light ran up both arms, invasive and exact. The columns around the room woke in full, names and ages and district tags cascading through them until the whole chamber seemed built out of stolen lives made legible. Malik stabilized hard enough to look 19 again. Z, listen to me. They built this to predict resistance. They copy us, sort us, press us flat until all the dangerous parts fit in a box. The system tore at him. He pushed through it. I found the intake list, kids from the corridor, high-pattern variants. They said we were instability. A file opened in the air over the table. Rows of names, children, status flags. Dre looked up at it and forgot how to joke. Those are children. Zora scanned until the room gave her what it wanted her to see. King, Zora, pending integration. Under it, fighting to stay visible. Guardian consent, D. King, incomplete. The room changed size around that line. Zora turned toward Denise and felt the rest of herself go very still. What is that? Denise opened her mouth. Nothing came out. What is that? I signed delay forms, Denise said at last, and the sentence already sounded like it had torn something getting up her throat. Delay. I thought if I stayed inside it, I could keep your name buried. I thought I had time. Zora stared at her. You signed me. I stalled them. You signed me. The chamber doors sealed with mechanical certainty. Voss's voice came over the system, warm and maddeningly calm. Zora King, step away from the interface. You have no idea what you are interrupting. Malik's face sharpened. Don't listen to him. Mom, tell her what she is. Denise couldn't. The red geometry moved over Zora's face, down her throat, across the inside of her wrists. Kin match confirmed. Primary analog key detected. Voss's voice came back lower. That's the problem with legacy systems. They remember family. The floor sealed her in with light. Denise threw herself toward the field and got thrown back. Malik fractured and reformed. Zora, run! I can't! The room tightened around her. Red light gathered at the edges of the table, then narrowed, precise as a blade finding a seam. Integration scan beginning. Denise dropped to her knees. Take me! Do you hear me? Take me! The file over the table opened deeper. Subject Malik King. Reboot failed. Next viable relative, Zora King. The scan brightened toward white. Episode 2. White Room. The light did not erase the chamber. It stripped it. The black glass under Zora's hands lost weight before it lost shape. The red geometry caged around her wrists held one beat longer, bright enough to feel intimate, precise enough to feel invasive, and then that went too. The room did not go dark, it went white. Not blank white, not soft white, not any white that belonged to weather or cloth or mourning. Institutional white. Survey room white. Intake wall white. The color of a place that called itself neutral because it had already removed everything human and expected gratitude for the efficiency. Zora stood in the middle of it, with both hands still lifted where the table had been. Her palms burned. Her shoulder ached where the field had seized her. Her breath sounded too large because there was nowhere for it to go. No train above. No apartment wall thin enough to pass somebody else's life through it. No refrigerator hum. No old pipe settling under winter strain. Only the thin current beneath the silence and the blood beat at the base of her throat. Then a red line drew itself at her feet. Hair thin, exact. It ran across the white floor, split, doubled back, split again. More lines joined it. A corridor suggested itself out of brightness, then another crossing it, then a stairwell, then an elevator outlined too seamless to belong to any building anybody actually used. Then a plaza opened ahead of her, and the shape of it reached her body before her mind caught up. Her block. Not really, not enough to deserve the word. The bus shelter stood where it should have, but the glass was too clean. The corner store sign held none of the tape ghosts from old flyers. The lot where the mural had fallen carried no dust, no pulverized brick, no fence shadow where torn trash bags always got caught after rain. Even the brick was wrong. No weather stain, no patched mortar, no grease where somebody leaned every morning waiting on a ride they resented needing. The room had kept the map and thrown away the use. A low tone sounded overhead, thin and measured enough to pass for courtesy. Then the voice came in, and the voice belonged to nothing with lungs. Baseline acquisition in progress. It did not come from a speaker. It came the way ownership came, already assuming itself. Screens lowered into the plaza, one after another. Her own face occupied them all. Profile. Front. Profile again. Iris lines. Pulse mapping. Bloodline geometry ghosting under the skin. Her body already reorganized into categories. She crossed the plaza fast and drove the heel of her hand into the nearest screen. It burst into white particulate, stopped a foot above the ground, and drew itself back together. Subject resistance noted. Her hand hurt. Good. The second screen brightened. Malik appeared inside it. Not memory as memory actually behaved, not incomplete enough to be honest. The room offered him to her in fragments curated for leverage. Malik at 16, turning toward somebody just out of frame, already smiling. Malik at 19, moving through a protest crowd with his shoulders set wrong for safety. Malik asleep sideways on the couch with a history book folded under one arm. Malik in the kitchen doorway with one hand up, arguing with Denise while pretending not to care if he won. There had been no camera for half those moments. Zora knew because she had been there, in the hall, at the sink, at the table pretending not to listen. The room had built him out of residue, pattern, everything the city had kept that it had no right to keep. The nearest screen deepened. He stepped through it just enough to suggest body without being granted the dignity of full weight. Z. Clearer than the wall, clearer than the tunnel, warmer than the room holding him. His name rose in her throat and stayed there. She didn't let it out. The room would take anything she gave it cleanly and sort it. Malik saw that too. Of course he did. His right shoulder flickered half a beat behind the rest of him. The room was spending effort to keep him coherent. Don't let it read you clean. Where are you? Inside enough of it to know what it wants. Another tone. Another part of the room woke. The apartment kitchen assembled itself at the edge of the plaza. Counter, table, relocation packet. Their home translated by a machine that had no concept of intimacy except as a compliance variable. The refrigerator stood where it belonged, but there was no tired hum. The sink held no rust line around the drain. The linoleum carried none of the wear around the table legs. Not a room. The summary of one. Memory fidelity check. A version of Denise turned at the counter. Tablet in hand, hair neat, mouth too smooth, shoulders too exact. The wrongness lived in the absence of fatigue. Tomorrow is the housing transfer meeting. You're coming with me. Same words, no pressure under them, no held-off fear, no warmth gone wrong under authority, just sentence. Malik's outline trembled harder. Don't follow the clean parts. The instruction landed where the room couldn't flatten it. This wasn't replay. It was route building. The scan wasn't only taking from her, it was arranging choices and measuring how she moved through them. Which version of mother, which version of brother, which version of block, which wound she stepped toward first, what made her hesitate, what made her harden. It wanted grief reduced to behavior. Tell me how to break it. His face tightened. Holding shape here cost him. Dirty it. How? Remember something it doesn't have right. The rendered kitchen brightened, inviting her toward it. No. Not that version. She closed her eyes. The white stayed white under her lids. So she reached past the image and took hold of the wall beneath it. Not the look of the mural. The wall. Brush drag over brick, mortar grit catching in wet paint, scaffold sway because the left wheel never locked clean. The smell of rust warmed by late sun. Paint drying too stiff on her sleeve because she wiped her hands on herself when she forgot the rag. Heat stored in brick after carrying an entire afternoon. Texture. Not seen, material. The room shivered. A bruise of warmth spread under the false mural across the plaza. The white around it no longer held evenly. Malik saw it first. Again. She reached for the apartment wall near the hall, the bubbled patch of paint by the outlet, the roughness under her thumb whenever she needed not to answer Denise right away, the refrigerator's dying rattle, the pipe knock before winter heat came through. Denise shifting weight on old linoleum a split second before she lied because language never caught up to fear. The kitchen render peeled at the edges. Not dramatically. It just stopped pretending smoothness belonged there. Variance contamination detected. Good. The rendered Denise still stood at the counter, but the wall behind her took stain. The blouse gained crease memory. The room had been built to read function. Zora was making it carry use. She opened her eyes. The plaza had darkened in places. Not darker exactly. More honest. Shadow had returned where shadow was earned instead of designed. Dust appeared in the bus stop seam. The corner store awning took back its old watermark. The lot beside the mural carried the faint shape of where torn trash always caught at the fence after rain. Malik stepped closer to the edge of the screen. The room almost gave him calves before it lost the nerve. It can't process what refuses to separate. What does that mean? It wants parts, one grief, one fear, one line. His body shook around the sentence. Feed it the things that make the parts touch. The plaza widened abruptly, trying to outrun what she'd done. The bus shelter sharpened. The smart wall brightened. The room gave her more city, thinking scale might pull her back toward obedience. She crossed to the bus shelter and put her palm against the glass. Cold. Slick. Wrong. No hand grease, no ring scratch, no breath fog, no old newspaper ink transferred by wet fingers, no heat where shoulders leaned every morning while people counted how late they already were. You forgot the waiting. The glass clouded under her hand. Then another handprint surfaced beside hers, smaller, then one higher, a paper coffee ring, a fingernail scratch, 2 breath marks close enough together to mean conversation or argument. The shelter began to fill with use, not people, the pressure of people, shared air, public impatience. The room had built transit without residue. Zora made it carry transit. The plaza took on sound in scraps. A child humming. A man muttering about rent. A bag zipper. Shoe soles grinding grit into curb. Somebody saying, "Hold the door." Somebody else not holding it anyway. A cough swallowed into a sleeve. Unauthorized witness density. Zora almost smiled. Malik lifted both hands a little, hope and strain braided together. That's it. Something hit metal outside the scan. The sound came in warped and far away, but real enough to bruise the white. There has to be a manual override. Denise. Then Voss, nearer than he had any right to be, his calm intact even through layers. If you force the field open now, you may finish what the first chamber did not. The plaza collapsed inward. When it reformed, it was a narrow white hall with doors on both sides. One word burned into each door at chest height. Mother. Brother. Home. Block. Alone. The red line under the floor ran straight to alone. The room still believed it understood her. Zora stared at that door and felt anger move through her body with the steadiness of something older than fear. You don't know me either. She opened Mother first. The room beyond wasn't rendered. It was archived. Compression damage lived in the corners of the image. The camera angle was too high to be human. Young Denise sat at a table in a fluorescent room with forms spread in front of her. Hair shorter, face younger, already too controlled for her age. A city seal on the wall behind her. A man off camera spoke in the careful voice institutions used when they wanted harm to sound temporary. Do you understand the temporary nature of the delay? Young Denise looked down at the forms. Her hand hovered over one page and drew back. Temporary keeps her breathing longer than immediate. If the line reactivates? A beat. Denise looked up. Fear had already been flattened into competence. Then you'll come back anyway. Guardian acknowledgement? Another beat. Delay, not consent. The clip tore sideways and vanished. Zora stayed in the doorway one beat longer than she wanted to. The archive didn't absolve anything. It made it worse. Not because Denise had cleanly complied, because she hadn't. Because even in the clip there was refusal inside the compromise, and refusal inside compromise still left damage everywhere. Denise had tried to narrow catastrophe and still delivered her daughter into its line. That kind of love was harder to survive than clean betrayal. The brother door opened by itself. That room was darker, smaller. Malik at 19 sat in a chair with dried blood at one temple and his body held together by anger alone. No system glow, no clean render, just him before he became a failed process. You built a machine that mistakes people for patterns, and you want me to help you stabilize it? No answer rendered. Maybe the room didn't have one. Maybe it was smart enough to cut itself out of this version. Malik leaned forward against restraints subtle enough not to count as mercy. If you erase me, you're proving me right. The clip cut. The hall pulsed. Archive isolation failing. Outside the scan, the chamber pushed harder at the edges. If this panel bites me again, I'm suing the dead. Dre, strained thin with panic and electricity. There has to be another route. Denise again, more breath in it now. Malik's current voice came from the far end of the hall. Zora. She turned. He stood without a screen now, still unstable, still tearing at the edges, but present enough to cast the suggestion of shadow. If I break this, what happens to you? His face changed in the smallest possible way. That made it worse. I don't know. He let that sit, because lying to protect himself had never been one of his habits. But if you let it finish, it gets a clean model of you. Then it won't need to guess anymore. The room tightened. The machine wanted a center, a clean center, something it could index and own. Zora looked at the alone door and understood what it needed from her. No. She reached for Denise, not the younger archived Denise, not the polished render, the real one. Tablet in hand, voice lowering when fear got close enough to taste. The woman who had built her love inside system language until the language started sounding like the love. The woman who had said some doors don't open, they swallow, and meant it from memory. Then Malik, not the laughing versions, Malik in the chair saying, "Prove me right." Malik in the tunnel saying, "Do not let them reboot me." Malik choosing danger because silence had started looking like complicity in a shape he couldn't bear. Then herself, hand on walls when thinking, stillness when hit, anger sharpened inward, not outward, art not as expression, but interface. Mother, brother, self, entangled. She pushed all three into the room at once. The alone door split down the middle. The red line under the floor shot sideways toward every other door. The white walls stained warm where contact had lived. Rust bled around hinges. Dust surfaced in corners. The hall gained the pressure of bodies without showing bodies. It stopped being a scan and started failing into a room. Witness density exceeding safe parse threshold. Outside, the chamber came through all at once. Glass stress, current, Voss giving instructions, Denise breathing wrong, Dre swearing at machinery. Malik stepped closer. The room had almost given him thighs now. That cost him. You could hear it in the static pulling at his edges. Push it back, not at the room, at the reed. How? Make it look at itself. The line clicked into place. The scan was reading her through inherited structures embedded inside the same city that had built the chamber, the forms, the delay, the burden logic, the routes. It believed its perspective was neutral. That was the lie. Zora took hold of the language the city used to disguise what it did. Delay, integration, variance, containment, stabilization, guardian acknowledgement, distortion event, civic peace, unregistered anomaly. Words laid over wounds until the words started demanding respect. She fed that gap into the scan. The room reacted violently. Screens exploded to life across the hall, layering term over term until the language stopped sounding rational and started sounding like the cover story it had always been. Delay forms over burden transfer, stability matrix over reboot failure, district containment over corridor intake. The white couldn't hold both the euphemism and the harm at once. Malik laughed once, breathless and half-broken by it. That's it. The room peeled. Under the white, the real chamber pushed through. Black glass, red field, Denise on her knees at the base of the table, Dre with one hand buried in a maintenance seam, a contractor key between his teeth, Voss beyond the threshold, still too calm. The scan slammed her into one final white corridor. The alone door waited at the end of it again. Desperate now, primitive. The room still thought the shortest route through her was isolation. Malik stood between her and the door. He was failing faster now. When it opens, don't go up. What does that mean? If the chamber vents to surface, they call it a district event. The block pays for it. Of course. She hated him for being right that fast. Can you get out if I break it? His body stuttered around the edges. Then honesty, because it was what he had left to give. Not like this. The corridor floor split open behind him. A red vertical drop. A shaft. Not image, leak. The room was no longer inventing. It was spilling solutions it had never meant to expose. Malik nodded toward it. When it falls apart, left side of the table, service shaft, don't stop for me. The sentence cut her open because it sounded like instruction and goodbye braided together. I'm not leaving you. His smile was brief and terribly familiar. You kind of have a thing with impossible timing. The corridor dropped out from under them. The chamber hit back in jagged pieces. Black table under her palms, red field around her, gold columns pulsing too fast. Denise on the floor with one hand flat against the table base like she was feeling for the machine by touch. Dre crouched by an open panel, contractor key between his teeth. Voss beyond the threshold with city security behind him, all of them waiting to see whether the room still belonged to them. Zora gasped and almost folded over the table. Dre spat the key into his palm. She's back. No, she's not. Yes, she is. Denise, pick one override and marry it. Zora, listen to me. That cut through everything. Not louder, more specific. If the field drops all at once, the chamber vents into the district grid. Walls, transit relays, surface infrastructure. It won't stay down here. Voss answered before Zora could. A regrettable but manageable radius. Denise turned toward him so fast it looked young. You are not purging a neighborhood to preserve your model. Voss barely moved. You built the burden logic, Denise. Do not mistake late discomfort for innocence. That line hit and stayed. Dre looked up at it. Zora didn't. Malik's warning was already moving through her body. Down. She looked at Dre. Can you vent it below? His face changed, like she had asked him to disarm weather. There's a lower bleed route, old emergency dump. If I open it, the chamber tries to discharge into dead infrastructure instead of surface. Voss's gaze shifted to him. And collapses any unregistered routes beneath the corridor, which would be unfortunate for the people hiding there. No good option. Only the least obedient one. Zora looked at Denise. Archive Denise. Kitchen Denise. Chamber Denise. Not innocence. Not absolution. Enough knowledge to matter. Open the lower route. Zora, open it. The room groaned. A crack shot through one of the gold columns, and warm particulate bled out of it like weather losing structure. Dre shoved the contractor key back into the panel and hissed when current bit his wrist. On 3. There is no 3. They hit the maintenance seam together. Metal screamed. The panel blew off. Red surged under the floor. Voss took one step forward. That was the most movement she had ever seen from him. Contain them! Security moved. Malik forced one last coherent line through the distortion. When it drops, left side of the table. The field burst outward. Not explosion, release. Glass screamed. Red-white light sheeted through the room. Denise hit the table edge. Dre caught Zora's wrist. The floor beside the table opened like a mouth. For one fraction of a second, she saw Voss through the rupture, upright, unflinching, already watching the consequences arrange themselves. Then Dre shoved. The shaft took them. The fall came in parts. Metal rung, air, pipe strike, concrete lip, another rung, body into wall, breath knocked loose. Zora hit the landing hard enough to black the edge of her vision. Wet concrete came up under her cheek, tasting of rust and old water. Her shoulder screamed. Her knees joined in late. Somewhere close, Dre swore with inventive sincerity. Denise coughed once, then again, because the first one had failed to stay contained. Above them, the shaft mouth glowed red through dust and steam, while the chamber discharge moved through old conduits like the system had been forced to remember infrastructure it no longer respected. She stayed down 1 second longer than she wanted to. Not because she couldn't move, because the world below the chamber had a different weight, and her body knew it before thought did. The air was colder, older, less engineered. The sound of the city reached here only after stone and rust and buried passage had taught it to arrive smaller. Train current, far away. Water moving in a pipe that had outlived too many maps. A settling groan from concrete poured by men who assumed nobody would ever need to survive beneath it. Zora pushed up on one forearm. The chamber below the chamber was a maintenance void, sweating concrete, pipe brackets furred with rust, broken junction box hanging open. Water gathered in the low spots and moved only when they did. Dre lay on his back, staring up into the red shaft mouth. I would like to formally register that I hate heritage. It should not have helped. It did. Not because it was funny, because it was Dre. And Dre staying Dre in a place like this meant something in the room hadn't fully won yet. Denise braced herself on the wall and stood in stages. The chamber sealed above them with one heavy final lock. Then the city returned in degrees. Train current, pipe water, old electricity flattened into room tone. Zora looked up. Malik. Nothing answered. No voice, no flicker, just settling dust. The red seam on the wall beside her shoulder pulsed once. Then again. The discharge had rerouted. Malik had dumped the chamber below instead of letting it climb to surface. The block might still be standing because he had chosen dead infrastructure over visibility. That thought hurt in a new place. She got to her feet and put one hand on the wall for balance. The root brightened under her palm. Dre saw it. Please tell me we're not doing the thing where the haunted city map only likes you. We're moving. Denise looked down the only passage out of the void. We don't know what's down here. We know what's up there. That ended it. The passage beyond was too narrow for side-by-side walking, and too old to have been built for anybody the city meant to protect. Service crawl, utility cut, emergency bleed path. The wall changed material every few yards. Brick, then patch concrete, then tile under paint, then exposed conduit. Like different eras had repaired it without trusting each other enough to match. Zora kept one hand brushing the wall. Not enough to read, just enough to stay with the route. Behind her, Dre talked because silence made him feel like prey. Just to update the ethics ledger. When I said I do small contract work, I feel like we all heard that as spiritually disappointing but logistically useful. What I meant was deeply bad, possibly criminally stupid, but maybe also why we're currently not vapor. If you still have any contractor access, Denise said, don't use it until we know how far the breach propagated. Love a sentence with the word propagated in a tunnel. The corridor dipped. Air changed with it. Less utility, more transit. Wet iron, brake dust, old weather trapped underground. The route stopped brightening and started listening. Ahead, the passage opened onto a dead station chamber where old tracks crossed under the city. Some rails intact, some lifted. One bed flooded black enough to look bottomless. At the center of the chamber, somebody stood, hood up, one hand resting against a pillar painted years ago in warning yellow and chipped all the way down to rust. Too small to be Voss, too still to be Dre. Not Denise, not Malik. The red seam on the wall brightened between them. Dre lowered his voice automatically. Please tell me you also see that. Denise stepped half in front of Zora without seeming to realize she had done it. The figure tilted their head. Don't do that. A nod toward Denise's posture. That only works up top. The voice was young, low, unafraid. Then, after a beat that let the whole chamber hear it properly, welcome below, King Air. Nobody moved. The station held sound too well. Water shifting in a gutter, Dre wetting his lips, Denise's sleeve brushing rust. Somewhere deeper down track, a low electrical flutter that sounded less like machinery than something trying to remember machinery. Zora looked at the figure and felt the route answer from three walls at once. How do you know me? I know what the route says when it sees you. That wasn't an answer, which meant it probably was. Dre leaned just enough to see around Zora. And the route says hi? Or does it always open with cryptic hereditary nonsense? The stranger ignored him. You're louder than I expected. I'm not here to impress the walls. No, you're here because the chamber didn't finish. Denise moved first, one cautious step. Who are you? The stranger didn't answer that. Instead, they looked at Denise in a way that made old recognition move through the air before the explanation got there. You first. Denise's mouth tightened. The stranger turned back to Zora. You need to move. Who says? The part where the chamber discharge already woke lower watchers, and Bloom Division won't be far behind because they always trace bleed routes after a failed read. Denise's mouth tightened harder. That one was true. Zora held still. You heard him? The stranger didn't pretend not to know who she meant. I heard a lot of things under the city. Malik. A shift in the eyes. Recognition, not softness. I heard him, in the roots, in dead corridors, sometimes in walls after blackout surges, never for long. What did he say? The stranger's gaze flicked to Denise too fast to count as accidental. He told me not to trust the people closest to the signatures. The room took that and sat with it. Dre looked between all three of them and wisely for once didn't fill the silence. The stranger crouched and pulled a hand-marked paper map from a crate near one of the platform benches. The map was real. Smudged, fold-worn, lived with. Red routes, black gaps, old station names crossed out, Dead corridors ringed in pencil. Places annotated in cramped writing, flooded, held, listening, no. "You can fight later," the stranger said. "Right now, you move." The root in the wall behind Zora answered the same shape. "You can read it." A sharp glance up. "You can't?" "I can feel it." Feeling gets you killed if you mistake it for fluency. No brag in the line, only cost. Dree tapped a symbol near the lower edge of the map. "What's that?" A pause. "A burn mark." "For what?" "For places they erased twice." The station got smaller around that. Then a radio somewhere in the chamber crackled to life on its own. Residents are reminded to avoid unregistered emotional anomalies and report any witness distortion to the nearest civic peace officer. Dre closed his eyes. I hate every word in that sentence. The stranger killed the radio. Then the wall answered with 3 sharp knocks. Everyone froze. The red seam by the door pulsed hard once. A second set of knocks came from farther down the corridor outside. Then a third, patterned, deliberate. The stranger's face went flat. They found the relay. Dre looked at the gate. Who's they? A maintenance baton came out from under one of the cots, grip wrapped in cracked insulation tape. Quiet men. The name moved through Denise first. Zora saw it before her mother could manage it away. You know them. Of course she does, the stranger said without looking at either of them. The first voice came through the gate before the first face did. Low, human, controlled enough to pass for kindness if you weren't listening for the absence under it. Open the gate. The stranger didn't answer. There's nowhere lower to run. Dre muttered, Hate that. The stranger leaned close to the metal without touching it. You first. A beat. Then another knock, lighter this time. Your route lit 3 districts. We only need one of them. That line had been meant for Zora. It still hit the stranger first. Denise said quietly, They're not retrieval teams. No. Then what are they? Human overrides. The phrase made sense too fast. The voice beyond the gate came again. You don't want the lower teams behind us hearing this. Dre raised both eyebrows. Now I need context on what lower teams means. The stranger was already moving to the back wall. Nothing good. Help me find the seam. Zora joined them. The wall was colder here, older, repair layered over repair. She let her palms settle against tile and felt just past the material. Not full memory, just enough to sense where the wall had once opened, been sealed, then forgotten. A rectangle surfaced in her body before it surfaced in the wall. There. The baton jammed into the crack. Metal complained. The gate lock turned. Not all the way. Testing. The voice beyond it remained level. You can be moved carefully now, or broken into transportable pieces later. Don't make procedure ugly. Dre looked over his shoulder. I vote we stop talking to customer service. The tile shifted. A hidden hatch pushed inward half an inch and held. Now, Denise said, and grabbed the coil of wire from Dre's wrist before he could ask how she knew. He blinked. That was not the same instruction as before. Then adapt. Together, they wrapped the hinge side of the gate just as the first bolt gave. Denise braced her foot against the lower frame, Dre against the opposite wall, both pulling hard enough to bow metal when the outside force hit. The room shook. Not from panic, from disciplined force. The gate groaned, but held. The hatch opened the rest of the way. Beyond it, a narrow service duct sloping down into dark that smelled like water and old iron. Barely a passage. Perfect. Zora looked back once. The gate flexed under another impact. Not rage, method. Men trying to enter the way an algorithm would if it had been taught hands. The route beneath the floor pulsed once, like it already knew where they would have to go next. The stranger went through first, with the map strapped flat under their jacket. Zora after, Dre sideways and muttering. Denise last, dragging the hatch mostly shut behind them. The gate took a third impact just before the hatch closed. Metal screamed. Then the duct swallowed the room. The service passage was too tight for fear to expand properly. That turned out to be useful. No room to pace, no room to posture, no room to make a bad choice bigger than a body moving one elbow at a time through old infrastructure. Moisture dripped somewhere ahead. The walls sweated. Every few feet a bracket waited to steal skin. The stranger moved like they had been measured to this kind of space. Zora kept close behind. Dre whisper complained until Denise told him quietly to save his air. That worked. For a while, they had only fabric on concrete, breath, and the baton tapping ahead for obstructions. Then metal shrieked behind them. The gate had failed. No one said anything. They all moved faster. The duct opened into a vertical maintenance cavity with an old ladder and black water below. The stranger dropped first. 3 rungs, left ledge, then jump. Don't test the water. Zora followed. 3 rungs, left ledge barely wide enough for 1 foot, then a jump to broken catwalk. Her shoulder screamed on landing. She kept going. Dre came next with more whispered profanity than balance. Denise last, controlled even here, though Zora could hear the breath she was forcing smaller. Beyond the catwalk, a relay office sat hidden in the bones of the station. 2 battery lamps, 3 cots, water jugs, canned food, a radio with its casing half gone. Enough spare clothes to prove the stranger wasn't always alone. The rusted service door shut behind them, and the room dropped to 1 low lamp. Sit down. No lights near the door. No talking loud enough to bounce. Dre looked around. With a different emotional context, this would count as hospitality. No one took it. Zora sat on the edge of a cot, and only then noticed how hard her hands were shaking. Not fear exactly. Afterfield. Scan residue. Too much signal still moving through one body. Denise saw it and stepped closer without stepping into her. You're still carrying field residue. Zora looked up. That a diagnosis or guilt? Both can be true. Zora looked away first. The stranger handed Dre the water jug. Flush the static before sleep, or the room will keep talking to you. He took it. The room talks? Everything below talks. The question is whether it's saying your name. That shut him up for almost 5 seconds. Zora drank. The water tasted metallic and old, but it grounded her enough for the wall behind the cot to stop pulsing at the edge of her vision. No one said Malik's name. That absence sat in the room anyway. The red seam in the wall behind her pulsed once. Then again. Then words bled through old paint in a red too precise to be anything but warning. Not safe here. The room froze. Then, from somewhere beyond the rusted door, deep in the old station outside, there came a sound too soft to be anything ordinary. A child, laughing. Just once. Then the lamp went out. Episode 3, Beneath 47th. The dark did not fall clean. The lamp in the relay office died, and for one beat the room still existed in afterimage. The edge of the cot, the water jug, the rusted door. Denise half turned toward the sound outside. Dre with his mouth open and no joke in it. The stranger near the radio with the baton already in hand. Then the dark took the image back. From somewhere beyond the relay door, deep in the old station outside, the child laughed again. Not loud, not playful enough to count as safe. Just one thin, wrong ripple of sound that moved through concrete like the room itself had remembered a child and didn't know what else to do with that. Nobody breathed properly. The stranger moved first. Not with panic, with routine. The baton came up in one hand. The other hand found Zora's shoulder in the dark. Light, exact, already telling her where to go. Down. Zora dropped beside the cot. Cracked tile bit through her jeans. Cold came up through the floor and settled in both knees at once. Somewhere to her left, Dre lowered himself badly and "sss" when an elbow found metal. Denise made no sound at all, which was worse. Outside, something touched the relay door. Not a fist. Not even a full hand. More like fingertips testing weight. The stranger crossed the room by memory. Cabinet, wall seam, loose panel. Everything in her movements said she had done this often enough for fear to become a timing issue instead of a feeling. A small covered beam of light opened in her palm and lit the room in broken slices. The cots, the wall stain behind them, the red warning bleeding faintly under old paint where it had written itself moments before. Not safe here. The letters had already begun sinking back into the wall. Outside, a man's voice came through the rusted door. Low, human, controlled enough to pass for kindness if you weren't listening for the absence under it. You keep choosing the difficult route. The stranger didn't answer. The voice waited. Patient. Then, open the door. We're not here for everyone. That put shape into the dark. Dre's head turned toward Zora. Denise did not move. The stranger stood close to the door without touching it, listening like there was information in the silence between syllables. Then she answered, dry enough to scrape. That should make us all feel much better. The man outside let that sit. The lower team is less careful than I am. The stranger's shoulders tightened by less than a degree. The route in the wall behind Zora's cot pulsed once at the edge of her body, as if the structure itself disliked the word careful in a voice like his. The stranger came back across the room and knelt by a rusted utility cabinet hidden behind hanging coats and old blankets. She pulled it aside, found a latch sunk low in the wall, and worked it with the heel of her hand until the seam gave. A slice of stale air opened in the room. There's another passage, Dre whispered. There are always other passages, the stranger said. The question is whether the city remembers them before we get through. Outside, the man said, you won't get far with her signal lit. That landed directly in Zora's spine. The stranger turned her face toward the sound of Zora's breathing. Then stop breathing like you trust the room. It was mean enough to help. Another hand found the back of Zora's shoulder. Denise this time, brief, controlled. Nothing about it read comfort. Everything about it said, I'm still here. The hidden passage opened the rest of the way. Not a door, a slit in the wall barely wide enough for a body turned sideways. The stranger looked at Zora. You first. Why? Because the route's loudest on you. No room left to argue. Zora went. The opening scraped brick dust down the front of her hoodie and stole paint flakes from her knees. The passage beyond angled down sharply, forcing her into an ugly half-crawl over old cable housings and rough concrete ridges. The walls held heat badly and sound too well. Behind her came Dre's muffled complaint, then Denise, then the stranger last. The relay room held for 2 breaths after they left. Then the door took a hit so heavy it sounded like the whole station had shifted around it. No shouting. No rush. Just force applied with confidence. The hatch sealed. The dark took them again. The passage dropped for longer than it should have. By the time it widened enough for crouching, Zora's hands were lined with grime and her shoulder felt packed with broken glass. The space they emerged into was not a room so much as a wound in the transit system, a maintenance shelf overlooking dead electrical channels and disused conduit runs, everything layered in rust bloom, damp mineral crust, peeling warning paint, and the residue of people who had used the city long after the city revoked permission. The stranger lifted the covered light again, just enough to mark edges. "Stay near the wall," she said. "Don't look straight into standing water. Don't answer anything that sounds familiar if it isn't attached to a body." Dre stared at her. "That sentence is doing too much." "It's doing enough." He swallowed. That counted as compliance. Zora straightened carefully. The root under the wall was back. Not bright exactly, more like pressure. A thread running under tile and patched concrete, clarifying whenever her fingertips got close enough to matter. The stranger saw it. "You don't know how to shut that off yet." "I didn't know it was on." "That's the problem." She turned and moved down the shelf with the kind of speed that dared the rest of them to fall behind. The tunnels below the district had a different sound than the ones near the chamber. Less sealed, less engineered. Old transit air moved through them in long breaths, carrying track metal, mildew, brake dust, paper rot, damp stone, the stale ghost of spilled coffee and wet coats from another era. Somewhere far off, an active train crossed a live line, the vibration traveling through buried steel like weather moving through bone. Dre kept one hand on the wall and the other on the back pocket where his contractor phone should have been. "So, just as a conceptual question, are these actual tunnels, or are we inside the city's unresolved childhood?" "No jokes near active walls," the stranger said. "That wasn't a joke. That was me coping in educational language." She didn't turn around. "Do it quieter." The shelf bent around an old dispatch room whose window had cracked inward years ago and been left that way. A desk sat inside under a tarp of dust. A ceramic mug had fused to the surface by neglect. Somebody had once written a date on the wall in grease pencil and then scratched over it so hard the plaster beneath scarred. Zora's fingers brushed the window frame. The memory hit before she could pull away. Not vision first. Sound. A radio squawking. Coins dropped on tile. Somebody laughing too hard because the train was late, and lateness still belonged to ordinary life. Hot brake metal. A woman pulling a child away from the platform edge. Winter air carried in on damp coats. A conductor muttering a prayer under his breath because the line had been failing all week and faith was cheaper than repair. Zora stopped hard enough that Denise ran lightly into her shoulder from behind. "What happened?" Zora couldn't answer right away because the wall had already started emptying itself into her. When she finally got her hand off the frame, the station noise faded, but it didn't vanish. It stayed in her body long enough to make the present tunnel feel crowded. The stranger came back 2 steps and looked from Zora's face to the window frame, then to Denise. "She's raw." "She came out of a chamber reed," Denise said. "Of course she's raw." The stranger's expression sharpened. "No, I mean, she's open." That put a different silence into the shelf. Dre looked between them. "Are those not the same thing?" "No," both women said at once, for entirely different reasons. Zora looked at the scarred wall inside the dispatch room until the sound in her head thinned enough for breath to fit around it again. "We keep moving." The stranger watched her 1 beat longer, then nodded. "Then stop touching anything you don't intend to hear." They moved on. This part of the underground had levels to it Zora could feel before she fully understood them. Not every tunnel below the city was the same kind of place. Some were only utility cuts, dead service channels, and maintenance scars. Some were root spaces, meant for moving people, goods, messages, bodies, things that had to disappear between one official map and another. And some carried something else. The stranger slowed at one three-way junction and put 2 fingers to the brick, not searching, just checking. "That one listens," she said, nodding to the left corridor. Then to the right. "That one leaks." Then ahead, "This one keeps." Zora frowned. Keeps what? The stranger looked at her like she had not decided yet whether the answer belonged above or below. Depends what you bring into it. That saddened Zora longer than she wanted. The path took them through an old ticketing hall next. The counters had been boarded over in places, cut open in others. Somebody had strung rope lines between marble pillars and hung blankets over them to make partition walls. One child's shoe sat by a column, lone and dust-clotted, small enough to make the space around it feel hostile. On the far wall, beneath layers of transit ads and newer maintenance notices, somebody had painted over an older mural and stopped halfway through, leaving one eye visible under the primer. Zora looked at it too long. The stranger noticed. "Don't wake that one." "You say that like I'm choosing." "You are, just slower than you think." Dre exhaled through his teeth. "I'm starting to miss regular betrayal." Denise ignored him. Or tried to. Her eyes had gone to the half-buried mural and stayed there just long enough to say recognition before she forced them away. The stranger saw that too. She didn't comment. That was comment enough. The corridor narrowed again, cracked tile underfoot, breath whitening where cold leaked through older structures. Church flyers pasted over city work orders. Red arrows painted decades ago and buried under later coats of paint, now returning in strips where damp had eaten the surface. They were still under 47th. Zora knew it not from a sign, but from pressure. The route carried familiarity like scar tissue carried weather. Then the air changed. Warmer. Not warm, just used. Bodies having existed in one place long enough to change the room. Then, smell. Rice, tin can broth, candle soot, soap used sparingly, damp cloth drying too slowly. The breath of sleepers, human routine built under threat and held there by repetition alone. Then the people themselves. They didn't appear all at once. A woman rose from behind a stacked crate with a knife already in hand before her eyes were fully open. A teenager beside a dead signal cabinet lifted a rusted pry bar. 2 children came up from under a blanket laid between old benches, their faces too still for their age. An older man in a worn station jacket did not move immediately at all, which made him the most powerful person in the room before he even stood. The platform had become a neighborhood by force. Blankets hung between pillars to make walls, cots lined up where commuters used to queue. Water catchments sat beneath old leaks. Someone had built a stove from a cut barrel vented into a maintenance shaft with whatever sheet metal they could afford to lose. Transit maps papered one wall, but the official lines had been crossed out and rewritten by hand in routes the city didn't admit existed. Shoes were sorted by size in a milk crate. Schoolwork had been pinned beneath a timetable nobody trusted. A woman sewed under a battery lamp with the same intensity somebody else might have used for prayer. This wasn't just a shelter. It was survival made domestic against the city's wishes. Every face on the platform found Denise first. That happened before they saw Zora, before Dre, before the pain on Zora's sleeves or the scrape on her cheek. Denise's posture, her blouse, the city still clinging to her in small formal ways even under dust, that was enough. A woman by the stove, said it first. No, not loud. Certain. Dree stepped half in front of nobody in particular, palms open. Okay, before everybody commits to the worst possible interpretation of our entrance, can I suggest we begin with the part where we are very freshly being hunted? By what? The boy with the pry bar asked. The stranger answered without looking away from the platform. Quiet men. That changed the room. Not panic, worse, recognition with practice under it. Now the older man in the station jacket stood. Slowly. Fully. He looked at the stranger first, not because he trusted her most, but because he already knew the burden of what she'd brought back with her. You brought them here. I brought them breathing. You also brought a signal. That one landed on Zora. She could feel it now, that the platform itself had noticed her, the root tugging under the walls, through the benches, behind the old station signage. She had entered, and the room had changed shape around it. Dre saw the same thing happening, and tried charm, because charm had kept him alive in too many smaller rooms. Hi, great, love the community build-out, hate the circumstances. We are not here to colonize the vibes. We need somewhere the city doesn't. Shut up, the stove woman said. He did, instantly. The older man in the station jacket finally looked at Zora. Not as anomaly, not yet, as girl. Then at Denise. Recognition reached him in stages. Not her face first. The posture, the restraint, the way she wore control like a city-issued garment she no longer noticed. His expression didn't soften, it deepened. You. Denise stayed still, hands where everyone could see them. If I'd had another shirt, she said, I'd be wearing it. That is not the problem. No, she answered, probably not. The platform received that without warming. The stranger turned slightly, enough to put herself between the room and the question she knew was coming. The older man didn't let her. What exactly did you bring back under my station? The wording mattered, not who. What? The stranger didn't answer at once. The little girl from beneath the blanket wall stepped out before anyone could stop her and stared at the metallic paint on Zora's sleeve. Was that you? No one shushed her. That mattered too. Zora looked down at her. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, maybe 8. Transit token on a string around her neck, one braid half undone, sock mismatched, eyes too careful. What part? The wall, the girl said, the one that laughed. The platform went still in a new way. The stranger turned, fast. Who laughed? The child blinked. By the relay, before the lights went. A boy beside her touched her sleeve once, warning or comfort, hard to tell. Dre found his voice again. Cool, love that the creepy child laugh event has witnesses now. The older man ignored him. His gaze stayed on Zora. Then, finally, he said to the stranger, Naomi. There it was. The name landed into the room like it had always belonged there, and still cost something to hear aloud. Naomi didn't look at him. What exactly did you bring into my station? Naomi. Zora stored it away without repeating it yet. Naomi fit her too well. The sharpness, the underground patience, the kind of name people gave girls expected to survive under pressure. Naomi looked at Zora's hands. The route knows her, she said, and the chamber didn't finish. That brought a murmur across the platform. Not gossip, recognition of a category no one wanted walking into their sleeping place. The older man's face barely shifted. And her. He meant Denise. He didn't bother looking. Naomi's mouth tightened. She came attached. That almost got a sound out of Dre. Almost. Denise stepped forward half an inch. We need a hold, one night. The woman at the stove let out a single, hard laugh. You need a miracle. No, Zora said before she had fully decided to speak. We need enough time for the city to look somewhere else. The older man looked at her properly then, not as signal, not as heiress, as a 17-year-old who had already walked too far into something older than she was. You sound like somebody who still believes the city gets distracted. That was fair. Zora did not lower her eyes. Do we stay? It wasn't a challenge. It was shaped enough like one to count. The platform held itself around the answer. Dre stepped into the silence before it could become judgment. We are 3.5 exhausted people, and whatever category she is, he said, nodding toward Naomi, like the insult might keep him from sounding too desperate. We came down through a relay breach after a chamber event that absolutely nobody here wants traced back to this platform. We can leave and drag that through your outer lines, or we can sit still and be grateful while all of you insult us with greater specificity. One of those options just feels less likely to get children shot at through old concrete. That moved the room. Not much. Enough. The older man's eyes shifted to Dre. Not warm, not impressed. Reluctantly attentive. Then back to Denise. I know that face. The platform quieted further. Denise's shoulders squared without lifting. That doesn't make this easier. No, he said. It doesn't. He took 2 slow steps forward. The old station jacket hung off him like one more layer of transit dust and memory. You're king. He said it to Denise. But Zora felt it. Not question, not admiration. Recognition rubbed raw by time. Something sharpened in Naomi's face, like she had known the answer already and still hated hearing it publicly. The man looked from Denise to Zora. You brought king blood back under 47th. The words moved through the platform like another kind of alarm. A woman near the blankets crossed herself without performance. The boy with the pry bar lowered it by an inch. One of the children moved closer to another without realizing she had done it. The route in the wall behind Zora pulsed once, low and deep. The older man gave the answer like it tasted old. You can have till shift change. Nobody relaxed. It wasn't meant to. Naomi stepped aside first. Then find them a corner before the walls start choosing for us. The platform broke into motion again, but not ease. A woman dragged out blankets from a crate as if generosity had insulted her. Someone moved a cot with the hard efficiency of making the thing happen before regret could interfere. Children were herded back behind the hanging partitions, though not before the little girl with the transit token lifted 2 fingers toward Zora in the smallest, uncertain wave. Zora did not wave back. Not because she didn't want to, because she no longer fully trusted what she carried into rooms. Dre had already found work. Of course he had. He took a kettle from one side of the platform to the other, then a crate of canned food, then a coil of wire. Every few steps, someone corrected him, redirected him, or took something from his hands and gave him a different task instead. He accepted all of it. No jokes now, just usefulness. Fast, earnest, slightly desperate. That was Dre's gift. He could belong an inch at a time before a room decided whether to kill him. Naomi went to the far wall and pressed 2 fingers against a dead signal box, checking something by touch alone. The older man, Reuben, Zora realized a moment later before anyone even said it aloud, because his whole presence had that old biblical, station-built weight to it. Watch the outer corridor instead of the newcomers. That was authority too, not performative, already busy. Denise stayed near Zora without standing close enough to count as comfort. Her attention kept splitting. Doors, outer line, children, Naomi, Reuben, the old station geometry. She was trying to manage the whole platform at once, which meant she was afraid enough to revert to the worst version of care she knew. A boy no older than 12 handed Zora a dented bowl and a spoon without looking her fully in the eye. Thin broth, rice, something onion adjacent, enough salt to feel intentional. She took it. The heat in her hands grounded her a fraction. Reuben approached only after the platform had settled enough to make listening less obvious. He crouched slightly so she didn't have to look up. "Your brother came through here." The spoon stilled in her hand. "When?" "Months ago." "With who?" "By himself." That sounded like Malik. That sounded like exactly the kind of thing Zora wanted to hate him for and loved him for at the same time. Reuben studied her face, not kindly, not cruelly, just with the weight of old recognition. "He had your same bad habit." "What habit?" "Touching things like the city owed him truth." Dre from the stove almost laughed. Almost. He caught himself in time. "Did you help him?" Zora asked. Reuben looked down into the broth like the answer might be easier there. "I warned him." "That's not what I asked." "No," he said, "it isn't." The platform around them had gone quieter again without seeming to. Even the children behind the blanket walls were listening in the sideways way children did when adults thought they had hidden the shape of a story. Reuben rose only when Naomi came back from the signal box. "The relay line's dirty," she said. "The route's still hot from the chamber discharge." Reuben nodded once. "Then we stay below true." To Zora, that meant nothing. To everyone else, it meant enough to start another sequence of movement. Lanterns turned down, one of the blanket partitions retied tighter. A woman near the stove emptied 2 buckets of gray water into an old drainage cut and covered it with broken tile. A teenager rolled a cart of supplies farther into the dark and draped a transit tarp over it until it looked like wall scrap. This place didn't just hide. It changed shape. Shelter when needed, route site when needed, listening chamber when needed. The underground didn't survive by one function. It survived by refusing to stay one thing long enough for the city to file it properly. Zora looked at Naomi. "You knew he came through." Naomi did not deny it. "He came through loud." "What does that mean?" "It means he touched too much, asked too much, and left the walls more honest than they wanted to be." That sounded like Malik enough to hurt. "Did he leave anything?" Naomi hesitated. That was interesting. Before she could answer, the little girl with the transit token appeared again at Zora's knee. "You really made the wall right?" No one stopped her. Zora looked down. "I didn't make it." The girl considered that. "Then why'd it listen?" Zora had no answer that didn't sound like somebody else's mythology. "I touched it." The child accepted that instantly, which made it feel truer than anything larger would have. Then the wall behind the cots shivered. Not visibly at first. In pressure. A subtle tightening in the air, the kind that made breath feel watched. Naomi's head snapped up. "So did you." Every face nearest them turned toward Zora again. The route under the wall had brightened, not into a line this time, but into a web of stress points through plaster, tile, old casing, remembered roots pressed into the material by years of use. The station recognized her the way the chamber had, less violently, more intimately, that somehow felt worse. Reuben moved first. "Take your hand off the wall." Zora looked down. She hadn't realized she'd leaned against it. She pulled back. The pressure eased. Not fully, just enough to stop escalating. Naomi crossed to her in 3 quick steps. "You don't lean in this station unless you want it answering." "I didn't mean to." That won't help when it chooses anyway. The line was harsh. The fear under it wasn't for herself. Reuben looked at Zora, then at Denise. She opens old locks. Denise held his gaze. I know. No, he said quietly. I don't think you do. That line stayed in the room. Then, because a platform can only hold so much fear before it breaks into ceremony or daily life, the stove woman banged a spoon against the barrel and announced soup in the same tone somebody else might have announced curfew. The room loosened half an inch around necessity. It bought them 20 minutes of almost normal. Dre used them better than anyone expected. He fetched bowls, lifted crates, rewrapped a cracked vent line with strip tape and cloth before anyone asked him to. At one point, the woman near the stove barked at him to stop carrying things wrong, and he took the correction so quickly and so quietly that Zora almost didn't recognize him. Later, when the platform had dimmed and the children had been pulled back behind the blanket walls, he came to sit on the edge of the cot beside hers with a bowl he wasn't eating. For the record, he said, not looking at her, I know what they see. She turned her head. He kept his eyes on the far wall, where transit maps had been rewritten in hand. Contract boy, city adjacent, somebody who made money helping systems know where not to look. The words had no joke in them. That was rarer from Dre than anger. I didn't know this, he said. Not like this, not the kids, not the below, not the walls remembering people. But I did know enough to know I should have asked worse questions sooner. Zora didn't answer right away. Because this was Dre unarmored, and the room needed to know she knew the difference. Finally, she said, You're here. That is a disgustingly generous standard. It's still true. He laughed once without humor. Yeah. Then quieter. I keep talking because if I stop, I start looking like somebody who helped build the blinds. That landed harder than anything he'd said all night. Not because it was big, because it wasn't. He looked at her then, and for 1 second, all the brightness and irony and adaptation stripped off him. What remained was 17 and scared, and trying harder than anybody here knew to earn continued existence. Then the moment passed. He straightened. Anyway, great. Love our found family sewer cult. Very normal evening. There he was again. Not fake, just defended. Before Zora could answer, the wall 3 feet behind her pulsed cold. Then colder. The platform lights dimmed without being touched. Not out, lower. Every face in the room went still. Reuben said only, dark cycle. That was enough. Lanterns were shuttered one by one until the station dropped to low amber and shadow. Children were gathered in close. Tools disappeared under cots or into sleeves. Even the soup smell seemed to flatten as the whole platform prepared itself to become less alive than it was. Zora lowered her bowl and listened. At first, she heard only the old station. Water, rail memory, sleeping electricity. Then, through the far wall, a soft triple pulse. Not knocking. Signal. Naomi turned toward it at once. The concrete in front of Zora's cot bled cold. Malik came through the wall badly. Not full body, not even half. Face first, then shoulder, then both hands fighting concrete and signal to stay long enough. His edges tore every time he tried to hold shape, but his eyes were clear. Urgent. Alive in the only way he had left. No one on the platform moved. Even the children understood this was not a thing you interrupted. Z. The name hit her so hard, it almost forced her to stand. Naomi's head snapped toward him, then toward Zora, then toward the outer corridor, as if she were counting how much time the station had left. Malik pushed harder against the concrete. The wall around him trembled with the effort of carrying him. "One of you," he said, voice double-tracked by whatever was still eating him from the inside, "is still carrying the city." The wall shuddered. Zora looked at Denise, then at Dre, then back at Malik, because maybe if she stared hard enough, the sentence would sort itself into a name. He strained against the concrete like he could force one more clean answer through. "It's tracking." The wall took the rest of him. Concrete, stain, old paint. Nothing. The platform did not breathe for a full second. Then, from somewhere out in the black corridors beyond the station, there came the first clean sound of boots moving toward them with purpose. Episode 4. Dark Cycle. The boots did not hurry. That was the first thing wrong with them. Out in the black corridors beyond the platform, past the blanket walls and cots and dead transit maps rewritten by hand, the sound came steady and measured, each step placed like somebody had all the time in the city and intended to use it carefully. No sprint, no shouted order, no metal panic. Just weight moving through old concrete with the patience of something used to rooms collapsing around it and people doing the collapsing for them. The platform heard it and changed shape. Conversation died without anybody announcing silence. The stove woman slapped a sheet of dented metal over the barrel fire, and the broth smell turned heavy and trapped. A boy Zora had seen practicing letters on the back of a transit schedule folded the paper once and slid it beneath his blanket. Two women by the far pillar pulled a hanging partition tighter so the shadows behind it swallowed 3 children at once. The little girl with the transit token around her neck disappeared between cots so fast it looked rehearsed. Of course it was rehearsed. This place had not survived by being surprised only once. Naomi did not flinch. She narrowed. That was the closest thing to alarm she seemed willing to give the room. She crossed the platform fast enough to count as urgent and quiet enough not to admit urgency. One hand gripping the baton, the other skimming old signal casings and pillar seams as though different materials held different kinds of warning. Reuben moved too, not toward the sound, but toward the people. A hand to one shoulder, 2 fingers toward the lower stairs. One old woman directed to the blankets first, not because she was fragile, but because she knew where the hidden tools were. The platform broke apart around him with the sick efficiency of something that had practiced its fear until fear became logistics. Zora was still sitting on the edge of the cot when Denise's fingers closed around her wrist. Up. Not soft, not mothering, efficient. That made it worse. Zora stood because the body understood command before emotion got there. The bowl was taken from her hand by someone she never saw. Dre appeared at her left shoulder with 2 blankets under one arm and the city contractor phone no longer visible in his pocket. "I put it under the stove bricks," he whispered, too low to carry. "If this turns into a purity trial, I need history to know I tried." Naomi turned her head without looking at him directly. "If you're done talking, help move the line." The line. Not them. The word mattered. It meant the children, the elders, the food, the signal, the bodies that had to disappear first if the station was going to stay a station instead of becoming evidence. The platform lights lowered another shade. Not out. Less. The amber shrank until faces existed only in planes and edges. The boots kept coming. Reuben stopped in front of Zora. The station jacket on his shoulders had gone soft at the seams from years of wear and shine at the elbows. Up close, he smelled like old paper, machine oil, and the part of soup steam that clung to wool after the warmth itself had gone. "You heard what your brother said." He didn't ask if she had. He knew. "One of you is still carrying the city." Denise's hand left Zora's wrist, not dramatically, just a withdrawal precise enough to notice. Dre answered first because silence always threatened to make him the wrong thing if he left it alone too long.
Okay, great, good, useful. Hate every part of that sentence. He lifted both palms a little, as if he could make himself look less like former city-adjacent labor and more like a person with redeemable edges. I buried the phone, and before anyone says it, yes, I know that doesn't make me innocent, just temporarily less stupid.
Reuben ignored the joke and kept his eyes on Zora.
The station's in dark cycle. If the quiet men are walking clean, they've got less than one room's worth of drift before they find what's loud.
His gaze shifted to Denise then to Naomi. So we strip signal now. Naomi came back from the outer platform with a canvas medical bag and dropped it onto the cot hard enough to pop the latch. Inside lay a chipped pocket scanner, a coil of copper wire, 2 ceramic transit tokens gone smooth with use, a folded cloth packet stiff with old wax, and a knife whose handle had been wrapped so many times the original surface no longer existed. Dre stared down into it. That is an upsettingly committed little kit. Naomi pulled out the pocket scanner.
It works enough.
Denise went still in the way she did when fear got ahead of speech, and she needed the body to look more composed than the room deserved. You're not cutting anyone. Naomi's eyes moved to her. If I needed your permission, I would have asked 2 corridors ago. Dre tried to help. Poor choice. I'm personally very pro not cutting anyone. Feels like a broadly solid civic principle. No one rewarded him. Reuben took the scanner when Naomi handed it over. The thing was old enough that the screen had gone the color of nicotine and rainwater. He brought it to life with both thumbs and waded through its resistance. The boots outside stopped. That was worse. The station held itself. Then came 3 light taps from somewhere beyond the outer corridor. Not a knock, not force, a language. Naomi's jaw tightened. They're sounding the wall. Zora looked toward the black beyond the platform and felt the root inside the station draw inward on itself, as though the concrete were listening too. Reuben held out his hand. Hands. She gave them. He ran the scanner over her palms first. It crackled faintly near the metallic paint caught in the cuticles. Then again over the inside of her wrists. The screen jittered with thin static, not clean enough to count as proof, not quiet enough to dismiss. He moved to her throat, her ribs, the seam of her hoodie pocket. Still unrest, still interference. The scanner wasn't finding a device. It was finding a body still carrying system attention. Dre went next. He let it happen with brittle compliance, jaw set too tight. The scanner chirped at a chipped transit card in his pocket and at an old mic wire buried in his jacket hem. Naomi took the jacket from him anyway and tossed it behind the cot. You don't get extra chances because you're funny. Good, he muttered. Because I'm mostly funny from panic. The line nearly earned a reaction from the stove woman. Nearly. Then Denise. She didn't offer her hands. She simply stood still while Reuben scanned her with the grim familiarity of somebody who had watched enough city searches to know exactly how humiliation liked to dress itself as policy. The scanner popped low at her badge, louder at the city tablet she finally pulled from under her blouse and set on the cot as if surrendering a weapon. Naomi wrapped it immediately in the wax cloth and shoved it under an overturned tool bin. Still, the route in the wall kept pulsing. Still, the station felt watched. The men outside had not resumed walking. That meant they weren't lost. They were waiting for the room to confess itself. Naomi looked at the wall, then at Zora, then away before anybody could call what moved through her face concern. It's not hardware. Dre swallowed. Fantastic. I love when the bad answer is also the creative one. Another 3 taps from the corridor. The station did not answer out loud. But the concrete near the outer stairs gave a faint, involuntary tick like old metal cooling. The quiet men were not just listening for sound. They were teaching the structure to answer back. Reuben stepped closer to Zora. "What did the chamber do to you?" Denise answered before she could. It scanned kin match. Naomi turned on her so fast, the movement almost counted as anger. "That is not an answer." Denise met it. It started integration and didn't finish. For one beat, even the children behind the blanket walls went quieter. Reuben's expression barely changed. That made it worse. "Then she is the loudest body." Not signal. Not yet. The distinction mattered. Zora felt everybody not looking at her. Dre's head snapped toward her first, reflex. Then whatever rose in him changed shape on the way out. Okay, hold on. Before this gets medieval in a very boring way, loudest body doesn't automatically mean cause. It could mean residue. It could mean drag. It could mean this whole architecture is still trying to finish a sentence it started in the chamber. Naomi looked at him. That was almost useful. I live to serve. Denise stepped in then, voice low. You are not exiling her because a chamber wanted to use her. Naomi's gaze never left Zora. That chamber already is using her. You just don't like the direction. The line cut clean because it carried more than the moment. Old line, older than this platform. The root under the wall pulsed harder. Zora looked past Naomi, past Reuben, past Denise, trying to keep all the children and all the danger inside the same manageable frame. A baby made one uncertain sound somewhere behind a blanket wall and was shushed immediately against someone's chest. That decided more than the argument did. Then I don't stay here. Denise turned on her. No. Naomi said nothing. That was agreement. Dre rubbed one hand over his face. I would like to note, for morale purposes, that the list of available plans is beginning to resemble punishment theater. Zora looked at him then. Really looked. The restless hands, the joking mouth gone careful, the fear staying plainly in his eyes, because there was no time left to dress it properly. If she left, he would come. She knew it before he did. Reuben nodded once, decision accepted, because the room had already been moving toward it. Then we break the trail and move the line before shift turn. He turned to the platform and raised 2 fingers. Not loud. That wasn't how authority worked here. The room obeyed him the way water obeyed gravity, badly, reluctantly, but inevitably. Children first. Blankets rolled. Lanterns lowered further. Food, medicine, batteries, school papers, shoes. Life reduced to what could be carried in both hands. Dre got handed 3 water jugs and a bag of rice because usefulness had once again outrun suspicion by an inch. Denise stepped closer to Zora, her voice lower now, tighter. You don't know where you're going. I know where I'm not. Zora. You don't get to say my name like this is discipline. That landed. The platform received it without looking like it had. Naomi turned toward the outer corridor and listened. The men still weren't moving. That meant they were either very far ahead or exactly where they wanted to be. Neither possibility helped. We need to give them a false hold, she said, something the wall will carry louder than her trail. The stove woman answered from near the cold barrel. Use the prayer wall. Reuben looked at her immediately. Too much residue. Exactly, she said. Let them drown in it. Naomi thought for half a second, then nodded. Fine. Dre's expression said the phrase prayer wall had only made the room worse.
I'm sorry, do we all know what that means? No, Naomi said, and your health depends on being okay with that. The platform moved. Not with relief. With function. A boy took two children by the shoulders and led them toward the service stairs. Women at the far blankets rolled bedding tight and tied it with stripped wire. Someone put out the last ember under the barrel stove. Someone else started stacking crates in a pattern that looked random until it became a funnel guiding bodies away from obvious exits. Denise bent to lift a sleeping toddler from a cot. The child, half waking, put one hand against Denise's collar as if stability lived there no matter what else had failed. Zora watched that and hated how complicated it made breathing. Reuben disappeared behind a partition and came back with an old signal lantern wrapped in red cloth. Even muted, it made Zora's stomach tighten. Red down here never belonged to decoration. It belonged to activation. Warning, involuntary access. He held the lantern out to her. This will take your pull and make it louder. Denise moved before thought finished. No. Reuben didn't lower it. Then give me another way to move 30 people through lower lines before those men teach the walls our names. Denise had no answer ready. That was becoming a pattern. Zora took the lantern. It was heavier than it looked, warm where other hands had used it. The cloth around the glass had once been white. Time and soot had turned it toward rust. The moment her fingers closed around the handle, the route in the wall leapt. Every face nearest her shifted. The station knew. Naomi came to stand on her right, not close enough to count as comfort, close enough to count as commitment. You walk with me to the prayer wall. We light it. We bleed the trail south. If it takes, we cut west and run clean. Dree appeared on her left with the rice bag slung over one shoulder, like he had always belonged under stations and absolutely hadn't. Absolutely not. Naomi didn't even look at him. Absolutely yes. I was objecting. I know. He opened his mouth. Reuben got there first. You stay with the shift. Dre's face did something complicated. Fear, anger, loyalty. The realization that all three had become public. No. This time, the word had no joke in it. Zora met his eyes. You can help more people here. That is such an insulting amount of maturity to put on me right now. Dre. He looked away first, which meant he was losing. Naomi took advantage of it immediately. He's right. You disappear in a crowd faster than the rest of us. That's more useful than another loud body in the line. Wow, he said softly. You really do weaponize compliments. Still, he set the rice bag down where the stove woman pointed and took the next two crates she shoved into his hands. That was his surrender. Or his love. Hard to tell where one ended and the other started with him. Denise reached for Zora again and stopped just short of touching. Her voice came out lower than before, not soft, stripped. I'm going with you. Naomi answered before Zora could. No. The refusal was immediate enough to expose fear underneath it. Denise turned. She is my daughter. And she is loud enough already. Denise stepped in, not bigger, just harder. You think I'm leaving her in your tunnels with half a story and a baton? Naomi's face changed by less than a degree. They're not my tunnels. Then why do they listen when you touch them? That one landed too. For a second, the platform went still around the two of them, the pass between their lines larger than either seemed willing to name in front of the rest. Reuben cut it clean. Enough. He looked at Zora. Pick. Of course. Of course it came back to her body. She looked at Denise, at the blouse still carrying city lines even under dust, at the wrapped tablet under the tool bin, at guilt so old it had begun shaping posture. Then at Naomi, sharp, underground, difficult, useful, afraid in a direction she hid as competence. Then, at the platform, the children, Dre already folded into the labor of moving people who did not belong to him and refusing to do it carelessly. "You stay with the shift," Zora said to Denise. Denise's face didn't break. That almost made it worse. "No." Then they split attention between us. "I can live with that." "I can't." There. That did it. The line landed beneath the armor, where Mother still lived even when apology couldn't. Denise's throat moved once. When she answered, it was so controlled it sounded torn. "You don't know what's waiting down there." Neither did Malik. The name entered the room and changed it. Denise took the hit visibly this time, not because the word was cruel, but because it was true. Naomi did not look away from the outer corridor. "We're out of time." The first real scrape of metal came from beyond the station mouth, not the quiet men themselves yet, something slender being worked through an older seam. Probe, sensor, tool. Whatever it was, the wall near the outer stair did not like it. Concrete vibrated in one long, low complaint. Reuben raised his hand. "Shift now." The platform broke open into motion. Children first, always. Down the side stair under the dead timetable boards. Then elders, then blankets, food sacks, tools, papers, shoes. Life reduced to what could be carried fast and kept alive. Naomi took the red lantern from Zora just long enough to strip the cloth tighter around the glass, muting it further. Then she shoved it back into her hand. "When we hit the wall," she said, "do not think of him." Zora looked at her. "That's impossible." "I know. Do it anyway." That was almost kindness. The kind Naomi could stand. They ran. The prayer wall lay deeper south in the platform and older than the rest of the station by a century, if the materials had anything to say about it. The corridor narrowed, then widened into an unfinished chamber where tile gave way to older brick, and the ceiling dropped low enough to hold breath heat close. The wall at the far end had been used by too many people in too many kinds of need to belong to only one ritual anymore. Names scratched into plaster, dates, route marks, transit tokens pressed into mortar, a child's bracelet looped over rebar, melted candle shelves blackened all the way up to the ceiling, chalk circles half buried under later paint, thin strips of cloth tied around exposed pipe. Not a shrine. Not exactly. A memory-bearing surface that had become prayer because people ran out of cleaner words. Naomi stopped 3 feet short of it. "This is where we make them hear the wrong thing." Zora looked at the scratched names and transit metal and old candle scars. The route under the floor ran straight to the wall and vanished inside it like something the station had once tried to bury and failed. The boots back toward the platform had changed rhythm. Not closer, more certain. Naomi killed the beam in her hand and listened once more to the corridor behind them. "When it opens," she said, "don't lean all the way in." Zora gave her a look. "That has become a pattern." "Fair." Naomi took a ceramic transit token from her pocket and pressed it into a circular indentation in the wall. Then another, not matching, old and worn differently. Root keys, not machine keys. The wall gave a soft inner click. It did not open. She touched 2 fingers to a chalk circle, faded almost fully into the plaster. Her mouth moved once around words too old or too private to give the room. Then she nodded toward Zora. "Now you." Zora stepped up. The lantern had warmed in her hand. The metal under the cloth knew where it was being taken and why. She put her free hand to the wall. The answer came at once. Not one memory. Pressure layered through material. Hands pressed here, in prayer and in panic. A mother pushing two children behind a maintenance hatch while sirens chase through street grates above. Men hauling canned food and church records below blackout orders. Somebody weeping quietly enough not to wake those sleeping 6 feet away. Somebody else laughing because fear had reached the point where laughter and grief had become neighbors. Train announcements from before the city renamed the lines. Hymns broken by rail noise. A hand drawing route marks in chalk and wiping them out before dawn. Zora almost lost her knees. Naomi's hand caught the back of her hoodie and held her from falling all the way in. "Stay here," Naomi hissed. "Don't let it take your whole body." The wall pushed harder. The red lantern answered. The cloth around it heated. The route under the floor flared through old chalk circles and carved names and token marks until the chamber brightened without light, as if everybody who had ever leaned their fear into this wall had leaned forward at once. Then the first new word appeared. Not scratched. Not spoken. Rising from beneath the plaster in red. King. The brick around it shuddered. Naomi went very still. Of course, Zora thought. Of course the wall knew before she did. Of course inheritance had been waiting in the material long before the city found a way to industrialize it. The route surged. The lantern took it and answered. Somewhere back toward the platform, metal slammed against concrete. The false trail had begun. Naomi's grip tightened on Zora's shoulder. Good, again. Zora hated the wall. Hated that it knew her. Hated that it answered recognition like a privilege. She pressed harder anyway. The brick opened deeper. Not physically. Enough. Shapes emerged under the soot and old whitewash. A route mark, a circle, a split line. Then something like a threshold notation cut diagonally through older prayer marks. The wall wasn't only taking her signal. It was surfacing old architecture. Naomi saw it at the same moment she did. There. She moved right, fingers tracing a hairline seam too buried to be visible until the wall chose to remember it. The false trail behind them was working. Zora could hear it now, boots accelerating toward the prayer room, old metal answering, one calm voice calling an order too low to make out. The quiet men had heard the signal and turned toward it exactly the way Naomi wanted. But the wall had not finished. Under Zora's palm, the red writing deepened and changed. Not a sentence, fragments. Mother. Then beneath it, half-formed, stuttering through plaster and soot. Line, / not clean. The breath caught in her throat. Not accusation, not absolution, a warning with too many possible targets. Naomi looked back fast enough to read only enough to hate it. What did it say? Zora didn't answer fast enough. Naomi read what she could from the wall and went colder. The seam gave under her hand with a scream of old metal hidden beneath plaster. Dark beyond. A stair dropping down. Not wide, not clean, old. The first true route beneath the station. The corridor behind them filled with the first clean sound of the quiet men entering the prayer chamber. No rush, no shouting, just the measured arrival of people who believed rooms, eventually handed over what they needed. Naomi seized Zora's wrist and yanked her off the wall so hard it nearly took the lantern with her. The writing in the plaster had already begun sinking back beneath the surface. What did it say? Zora looked from the half-buried red fragments to the corridor where the boots had turned toward the false light. Then back at the hidden stair. The answer came out smaller than the room deserved. It warned the mother line. Naomi didn't ask which mother, because she already knew the room didn't deal in answers that clean. She dragged Zora through the hidden opening. Behind them, the prayer wall lit hard enough to turn the corridor red through the narrowing gap. And from the other side of it, one of the quiet men spoke for the first time, calm as a person asking for directions. "Denise King," he said to the station at large, "you are making this more difficult than your son did." The hidden seam slammed. Dark took them.
Sequence archived. To continue the record, activate subscription.